Special thanks to my Patreon patrons, Noble Tier and Larking Tier. Hey guys, it's Michael and I'm back for another reaction video, and today we are back with some more Wendigoon's Conspiracy Theory Iceberg. And we're almost there. We're getting pretty dang close. We only got like about a quarter of the video left, so about maybe 3 more videos and we'll be done. But pretty dang close, so let's get into this. It's pyramids built by the Templar. Let's see what this is.
Pyramids built by the Templars Order is exactly what it says, with a little asterisk on it. So the Templars Order, also known as the Knights Templars, are specifically the Crusaders that were put together by the Catholic Church during the Crusades. Now, there are several overarching theories of the Templars Order, some saying that they invented more things in history than history gives them credit for, some saying they still exist today or whatever. However, this specific theory is going off of the idea that the Templars are the spiritual descendants of the Masons. The Masons, at least as we're going to look at them for this theory, are believed to be created and founded by Solomon during the construction of the temple in Jerusalem. So the idea is King Solomon, who was the son of King David, put together this order known as the Masons in order to build the temple and keep whatever secrets he had held close. And then over the centuries, that same group maintained these secrets within themselves and eventually became the Templars Order. So what's this have to do with the pyramids? Well, the pyramids, as you probably know, are considered a marvel of construction. In other words, it's not really known how at the time the inside of the pyramids was as intricately done as it was. This has led to theories like aliens helping the Egyptians build the pyramids, because it's not believed that any group of people at the time were advanced enough in their engineering in order to build them. However, as some have pointed out, several of the symbols and the sort of signage seen around the pyramids is very similar to that used by the Masons and therefore the Templars. Remember that thing I said that the idea behind this conspiracy is that the Masons were created in order to guard safely kept knowledge? And remember the theories I've mentioned previously of things like the Great Reset? Well, what if an order like the Masons or the Templars had advanced knowledge of what the world was like before everything reset itself? So, according to this theory, you have this one group throughout history who has all the schematics, all the information and knowledge from the world previous, and is now enacting that in this current iteration. So the reason the pyramid would be so advanced for its time in history is because those that built it had knowledge of humanity's previous cycle. So if the Templars built the pyramid, the reason they were able to do it is because maybe they knew how it was built on the first go around. Or you could even go farther and say perhaps the pyramids have been there since that previous go around and are just a holdover from that, or whatever level of absurd crazy fun you want to have with it. Endless elevators are a phenomenon that's been reported by several urban explorers. Supposedly, within abandoned buildings there exist these elevator shafts that go in far excess of the building's dimensions. Or basically they'll find—
Oh, I've actually, so to not incriminate myself, I have seen these before, and it is very weird. Not as in like it, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's endless, but you would look down and you would not be able to see the bottom, and you would look up and you would not be able to see the top. No matter, like, it wouldn't matter if the building's not very tall or very big, and it's probably to do with the light, but good lord, it's so creepy just to look down one of those. But yeah, we'll just say I've seen them before. We'll leave it there.
And an empty elevator shaft in which inside the abandoned building the elevator is permanently parked above, say, the 2nd or 3rd floor, and then whenever they stand on the 1st floor and shine a flashlight down, it seems like it goes on forever. There's even been some people go as far as to map out where these are located, and there are upwards of 500 of these supposed endless shafts in existence. The theory surrounding
this
the
one's kind of creepy
is that it is a transport system between caverns located within the earth and the surface world. In other words, either these people or creatures that exist in subterranean areas are using these elevators as a way to get from our world back down to theirs. And furthermore, whoever is in charge of building these buildings has direct knowledge of them and is either part of it or at least facilitating facilitating it. There's also several connections to things like missing persons cases and the idea that people who go missing in cities may be taken into these cave systems. And there's been theories I've talked about earlier on this Iceberg about underground laboratories and these underground sort of train systems that transport people back and forth. And this is supposedly the means of getting people underground and may, in some cases, still be in use. Divinity's playing card game is a sort of meta look at existence itself, and the theory says that all the different religious figures are in fact real and are playing a sort of amusement game with each other, and we're simply the pawns. In other words, the way that the game goes could result in natural disasters, or different rounds of the game could represent different ages of history. And that's pretty much it. You know the picture of like all those dogs sitting around a table playing cards? Well, it's like that, only instead of dogs, it's like Odin and Ra and Jesus. Regurgitation rituals are a sort of pagan ritual that was experienced in old world religions. It works.
Wait, hold on. This isn't what I think it is. This isn't like a bird, you know.
Off the idea that by ingesting something and then throwing it back up, you're essentially cleansing yourself from within in both a spiritual and physical sense. So practitioners of these rituals will eat a variety of things in order for the chemicals or essence within it to cleanse their own body. Now, if you're looking to eat something that contains an essence, because the idea is the stronger the essence of whatever you eat, the more powerful it is at cleaning you out, what do you think probably has the strongest essence? That's right, people. So, you know all those theories about the world elites being these cannibals who...
Okay, that wasn't where I thought he was going with that. So they don't eat the throw up, but that's where I thought he was going. No, he just went straight cannibalism.
Send people around the world in order to just eat them. Well, this is one of the theories for why that may be the case. By consuming the essence or body of someone else and then forcing yourself to regurgitate it, you're making the essence of that human clean your own soul, basically. So if you're driving home at night and you see 10 hooded figures circled on the road just throwing up in a circle, you probably shouldn't be there for several reasons, but being eaten's one of them. Hook Operators comes from a book known as Operators and Things. This book was written by a woman named Barbara O'Brien, who was writing about her experience when it came to schizophrenia. Basically, she had this idea because of her schizophrenia of how the world worked, so she wrote a book describing exactly how she saw people and existence. According to her, there's a small part of the population known as Hook Operators. These Hook Operators have the ability to spread their core charisma or sort of essence onto other people and make them see the world as the way that they see it. Or in other words, there's this small percentage of people who work as these sort of charismatic figures that can manipulate others to do whatever they want. And as for the majority of people, they are simply the things, or people that do not have the willpower to express their own emotions and desires and instead need a hook operator in order to guide them. The term hook operator comes from the quite literal metaphor of people being hooked and then operated in order to act however the operator wants them to. And in a lot of these cases, Barbara said that these hook operators operate as a sort of psychic vampire, or in other words, they leech energy off of the things, and then after the hook operator has left the thing's presence, that thing doesn't have the energy to continue without its operator. This can be expanded into many things, from politics and world leaders in general, and people who exhibit signs of control over others. However, that's a whole bag of worms I don't want to get into, so we're just going to keep moving. Regenerative death consumption is similar in a lot of ways to that regurgitation ritual thing I just mentioned, only a bit more gross. So going back to old like pagan beliefs and traditions, there was another specific idea when it came to eating the dead. In a lot of old world beliefs, there were ideas that the body and soul are much more intertwined than we understand them to be. Like, for example, if you ask your average religious person today what happens when someone dies, there is a distinct separation between body and soul. Whereas in several old world beliefs, the body and soul were interlinked until someone did something with the body. Like, for example, the ancient Egyptians believed that their leaders needed to be mummified and have their organs harvested. And a ton of different world religions believe the body either needed to be burned or buried to make sure that the soul gets into the afterlife. So the regenerative death consumption enthusiast asks the question, what if I eat it? Because theoretically, if the soul is still attached to the body and you eat the body, then the soul becomes attached to you. There were old world beliefs that had the idea that if you just ate a bunch of people's bodies, you could not only gain their power, but theoretically their remaining lifespan. So one could theoretically achieve a form of immortality if they just ate enough corpses. A lot of sort of ideas like this became legends for things like Nosferatu or just vampiric legend in general. And if there's some person you just don't like for whatever reason who's alive today, you can just say that he's a vampire from the 1400s who's been eating people for like 700 years. That's like a joke now, but in the 1700s, that's how the majority of like legal trials worked. Chakra removal is the idea that one can take a chakra and remove it. The chakras are supposedly the different windows to the souls and different places of energy within the body. So removing them would in a way be kind of like removing someone's soul, or at least a piece of it. However, there are theories that using the right forms of black magic and other forms of witchcraft, one may remove the chakra from someone else and in essence kind of deprive them of their humanity. There's even been people apply this concept to things like the MK Ultra experiments or other weird government experiments where they tried to simply make sleeper agents. And one of the theories of sleeper agents themselves is by removing the chakra from someone, you can then reinsert it with whatever you want. So in this case, a code or activation or what have you, in order to have a mindless agent.
Oh, sorry I don't speak too much on these. It's just so hard because the concepts are so out there that I'm like, I don't know how to ground it. So this one's like sleeper agents, essentially. You can remove the chakra and mess with it in some way and implant it back and have like a sleeper agent, which is kind of crazy. But I've noticed like the farther and farther I get down this list, I think when about halfway through the list, I was still talking fairly much in the beginning. But like this later half, I'm like talking barely any because I'm just trying to get the information in my brain. That way I can conceptualize it. But good lord, it's crazy.
The idea being, if you remove a piece of someone's soul, you can fill it in with whatever you want. Sexual erotic energy is saying that whenever someone is
of course
sexual or erotic, it lets off a tangible physical form of energy. Now, not energy like if you were to stab yourself with an electric plug, it would turn on a light bulb, although that would be funny, but it creates energy that can be used in different forms of magic or alchemy. I've mentioned on this Iceberg before about how there was ideas in centuries before ours about how the appropriate way forward in science wasn't through things like electricity, but instead energy and the spiritual. This is kind of saying that if we did go that direction, then libido...
Alright, this is throwing me so off, but like the red part on this like person, that straight up looks like Texas. It's throwing me off so much. I like glanced over there and I was like, wait, is that Texas? That's so crazy. But let's get back to this. Hold on.
Spiritual. This is kind of saying that if we did go that direction, then libido would be used as a legitimate form of power, or power in whatever form power would exist. Furthermore, this is saying that demons that exist, like a succubus and incubus, that are supposed to seduce humans, actually exist as a form of energy parasite, or basically the reason that they do those seduction acts is as a means of harvesting your energy. So the next time you think someone just wants you for your body, they don't. They want you for your secret soul battery thing. Trees are mammals? Yep. Time history moves in reverse. Okay, no, I'm kidding.
Okay, I was legit like, you just gonna leave that there?
So trees, as we know them, do have forms of communication with each other, and through things like chemical signaling, they're able to talk to each other. The idea is way back in the evolutionary tree, there was a branch between mammals and trees. Anyway. And from a common ancestor, the two shot off from each other. I've mentioned a lot at this point the ideas of forest having this sort of hidden energy, or the idea that there are living things within mountains. Well, if trees have a sort of collective consciousness that is more intricate than our current understanding forms of life, then perhaps a lot of the supernatural things that take place within the woods are the responsibility of the trees themselves and not whatever we think is out there amongst the trees. Or in other words, perhaps trees as they exist are a more complicated organism than we currently think. Time and history moves in reverse is referring to something known as retrocausality. Retrocausality. Yeah.
Causality, yeah.
That word is a way of saying
Retrocausality.
that the effect makes the cause and not the other way around. In other words, our understanding of how the world works is I do an action, therefore an.
I swear, didn't this was already on the list, wasn't it? I just remember him talking about there being a reverse cause and effect. I don't remember where it is, but I remember him saying that before.
Event occurs. This is saying that things are preordained. So therefore, this thing in the future has to happen. So that causes me to make a series of steps that lead to that happening. So history and events as we understand them do not exist because of the actions of people, instead because we have to hit these certain graphs, and therefore people were forced to take action to get there. Every time you go down the rabbit hole of research with this, it always comes out to something related to simulation theory, or almost similar to that divinity's playing a card game thing I talked about. Basically the idea that something is making sure certain events take place, and we're pretty much just bystanders who are forced to walk the path of it all. Mathvault of Trinidad was really hard to find anything about, so bear with me here. With a lot of the ones this deep into the iceberg, people will mention it in passing, but they won't really talk about what it is, so I've kind of had to like fill in the gaps in some parts, so let's see how this goes. On the island of Trinidad off the coast of Venezuela, there is a supposed thing known as the Math Vault. Around a series of caves and caverns in the area, there we go back to caverns again, there are several mathematical equations carved into rock. And to anyone who looks at them, even researchers and other high-minded people, it's pretty much just nonsense. Or in other words, all these half-finished equations just kind of seem like random numbers rather than an actual long strung out equation. Now the theories around it are that these numbers are a sort of divine number, and the reason they look senseless to most people is because most people aren't divine or gifted enough to understand them. And in theory, if someone was to understand them and figured it out, they would be able to open this math vault. And what happens after that is anyone's guess. Some people say that they would be able to unlock a sort of algorithm that determines the state of world affairs or future occurrences that are going to happen. Some think that it's a method to talk to aliens, and that whoever can open up the math vault will have the means to communicate with extraterrestrials. It's anyone's guess, but the basic idea is that there is this hidden code on the island of Trinidad that no one's been able to figure out yet. Entity merging is a concept when it comes to computing. However, what it basically means is whenever you have two different things that share the same name. So apply that to the real world and say we have two of the same person existing in different areas, or as we'll say here, in different timelines. This goes back to a lot of concepts of string theory, and this is pretty much a form of quantum entanglement, or the idea of two different existing things merging together. The idea with entity merging is on either side of two separate timelines or strings or universes, whatever you want to call it, you have two instances of the same person, and either by accident or ritual or whatever, the two merge into one. Now this could be used as everything from the Mandela effect to supposed gaps in history. In other words, perhaps the reason that people just seemingly disappear at random, or perhaps the reason you seem to misremember events from your own past, is because you merged with a slightly altered version of yourself, or that previously mentioned missing person just merged with a different version of their self. Inside out Earth. Flat Earth, get it out of here. Hollow Earth, amateur. Inside out Earth, now we're talking. Inside out Earth is exactly what it says. It's the concept that the Earth exists within itself, and gravity as we understand it is not the motion of the Earth spinning and pinning us down, but instead the centrifugal force of the Earth pinning us essentially to the walls. So if you take that idea and then take concepts like hollow Earth, or the idea that there are these hidden cavernous systems underneath us, that would actually be a way to get quote-unquote outside of Earth. Hence one of the reasons that the supposed hollow Earth is such a safely kept secret. And the sun as we know it is just kind of like a really small sun in the middle of the sort of floating area that is the inside of the Earth. And you may ask yourself, well, how do we like look at space and stuff? That's just because whenever we look at space, we're looking at like these little cracks that go outside of the inside out Earth. I mean, why do you think the sky's blue, huh? It's because you're looking at the ocean above you idiot. Human biocapital is an absolutely terrifying couple of words, but here we go anyway. It's the quite literal idea that humans are used as a resource capital throughout history and even in the modern world. We understand that things like slavery used to exist, but imagine after slavery became kind of taboo, instead they moved to using people as either a fuel source, either as food, or quite literally a fuel source. There's supposedly things like the Afghan cannibal caves, or the idea that there are these groups of shepherds that exist throughout the Afghanistan mountain system who have been raising humans over the centuries to sell to these world powers as a food source, along with things I mentioned earlier like China and the meat market trade, with the ideas that all of these elites are selling humans to each other. It's one horrifying thing to imagine that people are used in these sort of markets. It's an even more horrifying thing to imagine that people are used as a primary economy source and influence world decisions based on whoever can sell the most goods. TGA gray spacing is another one of those things, like the Math Vault of Trinidad, where I had to piece together a bunch of sort of ideas of something, so bear with me. TGA is short for something known as transient global amnesia. This is basically a situation in which several people forget major historical events. And gray spacing, as it's defined here, is a quite literal version of sort of blacking out or forgetting large gaps in time. So TGA gray spacing, as I understand it, is the idea that there are powers at hand making people forget major historical events. A lot of concepts around this relate back to things like time dilation
or we're just like, nowadays people are so ready to move on to the next thing because like horrible things will happen outside of the world, or not outside of the world, outside of your like area, like as in your manosphere, where you live, where you work, you know, those kind of places, or just in your country. And outside of that area, you don't really pay attention to after about a week or maybe 2 weeks, and then you just forget all about it. And that could be kind of why it is, because we move on from stuff super quick.
Major historical events. A lot of concepts around this relate back to things like time dilation or amnesiacs, or in other words, you can induce people to either misremember large periods of time or just forget things entirely. And it relates back to the idea that through some form of magic or ritual or even science, powers at hand can make people forget certain events. So, if there are large groups of people who forgot major events that happened, what's to say all of us, in some way, haven't been made to forget certain things that have happened? What if there's been some cataclysmic event that would destroy people's perception of reality? Or what if there's been national security breaches that put entire governments at threat? If in things like MK Ultra and all that, we see that the government has been experimenting with people and how to make them forget things, what's to say we haven't been made to forget things ourselves? The ocean at night refers to a specific event that happened in the Gulf of Aden. I need to explain a couple of things for this to make sense. So for one, there is this thing seen in marine life known as vertical migration. Basically, if there is a creature that does not like the light and prefers the darkness, then as the sun goes up, it goes deeper underwater, and as the sun goes away, it may go closer to the surface. And alternatively, if there is an animal that likes the light, and it's a very bright day, it may go deeper underwater, but as the sun leaves, it may find light sources near the surface or even above water. Hence the term vertical migration, because within a day, these ocean life creatures could migrate up or down depending on the light. This is also believed to be part of the reason why massive underwater predators are never seen on the surface, because if they're nocturnal and simply follow food sources as they move underwater, then the food source that they're chasing probably won't ever go up to the surface, because at night, whenever this creature is active, there isn't a giant light source for them to get to. This is the reason that whenever you go night fishing, you set a light out in the water, because the little fish come to find the light because that's what they follow, and then the big fish follow them. So in the Gulf of Aden in the year 2010, there was a project for something that I've only seen called the artificial sun. I believe the purpose of it is it was a sort of thermal reactor that they decided to place within the ocean as a cooling system, or in other words, a very, very bright light source that creates a lot of energy that is harvested for power. So they set it in the ocean as a means of keeping it cool. However, remember that whole artificial light thing makes things move differently in water? So they set a fake sun on the ocean, and supposedly that woke up something very big. During this artificial sun project, there were 82 earthquakes reported in a 48-hour period around the area. Shortly after that, 27 different world navies sent their soldiers to fight quote-unquote pirates around the area. However, leaked text log leaks have shown that there was a giant vortex in the area they were responding to instead. And the whole fighting pirates thing was just a farce made up in order to dissuade interest. So imagine there is this giant super...
So wait, this is actually real? This sounds like a sci-fi movie, straight up. This sounds crazy.
Fish underwater that periodically eats things like, I don't know, sharks or whales or whatever. However, it never comes up to the surface because its prey never travels up that far. Now imagine you set a giant sun on top of the ocean and all of the prey animals go to it and the giant fish comes, and that's what supposedly happened. So supposedly in 2010 in the Gulf of Aden, due to our own stupidity, we woke up a giant Cthulhu thing, and then a bunch of navies had to go deal with it. Thank you, WikiLeaks, for that. Berry bushes are a theory around the missing 411 incidents in the US. I'm going to start an entire series about missing 411 because there's way too many interesting things to talk about. But short version for now, around the United States every year, an unholy amount of people go missing in national parks. Not only that, but it's...
Yeah, I've watched a few of Mr. Ballin's videos, and there's some crazy ones. There's some crazy freaking stories.
It's almost always through really weird circumstances. Like someone will be found dead and naked on the side of a trail, and then their clothes found like neatly folded 10 miles away. Or people will be found like ripped to pieces at the top of a tree with their shoes gone for some reason. And berry bushes are a theory that someone proposed to why this may be the case. So there are several plants as we understand them in the natural world that have hallucinogenic effects. Well, someone asked the question, what if there is like a berry bush or something similar that exists in the United States parks that we just don't know about, that whenever someone inhales it in, they just go mad. This would explain things like kids being able to run 9 miles away and then collapsing, or people taking off all of their clothes before folding them up and then running up a mountainside. The idea behind this is perhaps there is a plant that we don't know about, or maybe the powers that be don't want us to know about, that causes people to essentially go mad, run away, and lead to these disappearance cases. The sky is alive. So
that's actually
remember, like, I forget how many years ago, I talked about the concept of UFOs being these living creatures. Okay, so apply that to all of it. This is saying that the astral bodies like stars and planets and the sky itself as we know it is a sort of organism that is specifically trying to communicate with us. The idea being that the stars themselves as they exist were made as a sort of navigation system for us to use, but not only that, it allows a constant state of surveillance. Most of this ties back into simulation theory, with the idea that the sky is sort of the net around our simulation itself, and changements and movements in it can be everything from maintenance to a sort of system glitch or reset on itself or whatever. And in whatever regard, the sky itself is its own responsive system. Volcanoes' real purpose. So you know that whole reset theory thing that I've mentioned? How humanity exists and then we all wipe ourselves out for some reason and then the whole cycle just keeps going. And you know how like currently nuclear energy is the thing that's all cool, and as time moves on we develop more and more of these nuclear or thermal reaction systems. And you know how volcanoes are weird because they're like this random just giant amalgamation of thermal and nuclear energy just in the middle
I
of
get where you're going.
The idea is that perhaps volcanoes are the leftover remnants of nuclear energy from the previous cycle. That if within these mountain systems we allowed a nuclear plant to sort of go haywire and exist for hundreds and thousands of years, it would eventually develop into a volcano. So these previous world's power sources are now seen as these giant volcanic rocks in our current loop. Yeah, loop, that works. And perhaps volcanoes themselves are one of the last remaining remnants of the societies that existed before us and in advancement to us. Nano UFOs and Giga UFOs. So as most people understand, the UFOs are like about the size of a ship, or the flying saucer in the air, whole thing. So nano UFOs can be as small as something that can fit into your bloodstream, with the idea being that these flying saucers can go inside of people and cause them to do whatever they want, similar to smart dust, which I mentioned earlier. And giga UFOs can be clouds or stars or the entire sky itself. The idea being that these unbelievably massive UFOs exist potentially all around us as either a surveillance system, or it goes back to either the whole simulation idea of we're just being watched and these giga UFOs could be like the entire world around us, or alternatively we're just really small, which is a bit more wholesome, I think. Probably I do have to mention,
I mean, we are really small
for like the nano UFO specifically. I came across this entire like small book this dude wrote about how a fly had been following him around, and he was convinced it was a nano UFO that was tracking his location and reporting it to someone. And like one of the top replies, someone was like, I think that's just a fly. And the original guy goes, no.
Well, flies just do that in general.
Like, these are all fun, but it is kind of sad sometimes, I'll admit. Like, see, like, if someone believed in all of these at once, I don't think they'd be able to function at anything, really. Like, if you believe the sky simultaneously is a giga UFO, a living creature, as well as a map above the simulation, that's got to be rough. Holistic.
That's too much. It's too much. Alright, we have essentially 2 videos left and we'll be completely done with this, and then we can move on to like some other videos of his that are a little bit shorter, like maybe an hour-long videos. Those I can probably do in one sitting, depending. Sometimes I'll probably do them in 2 videos, but yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.